VCT Americas Stage 2 2024 is just around the corner, so it's time to check in on each fan base and see how panicked they are. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today we are doing panic rankings for VCT Americas before Stage 2 gets started. So this is the board we have today. If you've seen one of these already on my channel, you know the levels, but we're going to go through them again. So at the very bottom is the Withered Wojak. So this is beyond panic. This is everything sucks, everything's terrible, nothing's gonna get better. Right above that is panic, so panicked, obviously. In the middle, we have copium, so about in the mid-range, still hopeful for the team, but maybe, trying to have a bit of delusion to make yourself feel better about it. So that's our mid-tier. Then we have hopium, so second from the top, so this is you're riding high on your team's hopium. And then at the very top is the Chad level, so you're feeling great, you're feeling like a Chad, nothing can go wrong. So I'm going to start with an easy team to rank, and that is Furia. We're putting them right down in the depths below. So when it comes to Furia, they had a really bad stage. They didn't win a match. They won, I think, 2 maps during the whole thing. They will be looking to improve, but it doesn't look like this team is really going to do much. They missed out on getting Pancata. They were trying to get him, but Pancata ends up going to Loud, so them taking another hit from their Brazilian brethren. I don't see their Stage 2 going much better than their Stage 1 did, but hey, crazy things have happened. Now moving on to another team that has its similar problems, and that is MIBR. So you got 2 Brazilian teams at the bottom. MIBR, similar situation. They didn't win a game the entire split. MIBR, similar situation to Furia. They went winless during Stage 1. They didn't even win a map. The hope for MIBR is that the roster continues to improve, and then maybe next year we can see this team do something that isn't just lose all the time. They had a promising start to the year at kickoff, looked like maybe they'll be a team in the mid-range, but then everything just fell apart during that Stage 1. So things in theory could get better. These 2 teams will face each other during Stage 2, so one of them has to win. So we'll see who ends up coming up on top. But yeah, the 2 Brazilian teams, they will be in the depths for now. Moving on, we have C9. So where do they deserve to be? They had a good Stage 1, which probably put them around in this level during that stage, but then they bowed out against G2, so does that put them down in panic? I'm gonna put them down in panic. Maybe there is some hope from this team that, they have Oxy, and Oxy is absolutely fine. He was one of the best players during Stage 1, but does that mean that this team is kind of carried, that this team is going to go through a similar fashion that they did in 2023, where they had a good regular season and then they couldn't make Tokyo, and then LCQ didn't go their way either? So I do think there is panic in the scene fan base about that. There is an argument to put them in copium because they have promising talent like Oxy, but I feel like we're gonna see a similar story to 2023. Moving on to Energy. So some big sweeping roster changes for this team. Marved and Demon 1 out, FNS and Som return. Is that gonna make this team a super team? I do think that expecting this team to be a super team right out the gate, especially when they only have 4 matches left and this is a very quick turnaround for this team, I think the realistic place for them is copium. During the end of Stage 2, they definitely would have been down below in panic and withered, not even qualifying for playoffs, especially expecting to be one of the best teams in the entire world. But they have FNS and Som back. The vibes are good. They definitely should improve. It can't get much worse than how it did. Or can it? Will they go winless during the whole stage? We will see, but I think, bringing back those familiar faces in FNS and Som might be too little too late, but definitely is giving the fan base a bit more hope than they had before. Moving on, we have Leviathan, a team that did go to Masters Shanghai, but bowed out earlier than they would have wanted. So them qualifying would have put them around in this stage, but after that mediocre performance at the International, does that bump them down? I think Copium's probably the way to go for this team. I could put them up in Hopium because, hey, they still looked like one of the best teams in the Americas. But there definitely is some questions surrounding this team. They did make a head coach change, so we'll see how that affects them. Is that going to make them get better? Is their map pool going to get deeper? Or are we going to see this team not be able to find the same momentum that they had during Stage 1? Ospas is going to do his best to drag this team to a Champions qualification. They are more than likely going to be in playoffs, so I wouldn't worry about qualifying for that, but it's all about getting that trophy this year. So we'll see if they're able to do it, but I think Copium probably a good spot for them right now. Moving on to Crew, a team that definitely has bounced up and down these rankings throughout the year. They were down in panic before Stage 1 started, I remember, and then they got bumped up to Hopium and Chad level. But with that disappointing performance in playoffs, that definitely bumps them down. So Kind of want to put them in Copium. I feel like there's an argument for Panic, but I think Copium should be the realistic one. I'm putting a lot of teams in Copium right now. Again, this is before this stage, so we really don't know how these fan bases are truly feeling. But I feel like with Crew, they showed a lot of promise. They just could not get it done when it mattered most, but they were able to go on a run late last year to make it a champions. There was a realistic chance that they do that again, so we'll see if they can do it, but I can't really make an argument for them being panicked, and I can't really make an argument for them being, hopium and, really feeling good. Probably more on the Panic side, if we're being honest. Moving on, we have 100 Thieves, who after winning the VCT Americas playoffs definitely bumped themselves up to around here. And they did go on a decent run during Shanghai. A lot of people picked that team to win. I wasn't buying it personally. I did make a video about their chances at winning Shanghai about 5 hours before their matches with Heretics, and that didn't go well, so I don't think I can put them Chad, but I think the fan base is still pretty hopeful for this team. Maybe a bit delulu, but I'll put them in Hopium. I think there is a lot of reason to be hopeful for this team. They have a good solid roster. They had a decent placing at the International. They beat some good teams. Champions is not out of reach for them. They have to have a good stage 2 to be able to get into playoffs and to qualify, but there's a good chance they do it. They're a solid team. I do expect them to be at champs, but they have to make it there, and I think their fan base is pretty high on the Hopium right now. Moving on, we have Evil Geniuses, who, I think I'm going to put them up in the Hopium, which does kind of surprise me. They did not have a good start to Stage 1. They lost, I believe it was 3 matches in a row. Their playoff hopes were pretty dead right away, but then the team started to play a lot better. Jogamo, really rough start to the stage, absolutely was frying by the end of it. So is the team that we saw at the end of the stage what we're really going to see with Evil Geniuses? Having that pressure off of them when they basically knew that they were done for the stage definitely gave this team life. So if they try to stay within that mindset of just having no pressure, just thinking the expectations are on the other teams, we don't have as high expectations, so we can just play our game, play the way that we know how to, and just, get carried by Jogamo. I'm just kidding, but overall, their roster is pretty good and showed a lot of promise by the end of Stage 1, so Hopium it is. So we have 3 teams left. I'm going to be talking about Lao next. I feel like Copium, I think they're going to join the rest of the teams here. Loud definitely had a rough Stage 1. They played better by the end of it to qualify for playoffs, but then they lost the only match. So they did not qualify for Shanghai, the first international that they've missed in quite some time, and this team definitely has a chip on their shoulder now, but they just got Pankata back, and there was rumors that Les was going, but he's still listed as on the roster, so I don't know if that's still happening or if that was just a rumor that was swirling around, but seems like Les is still on the team, which I do think is a good move. Les has probably been their best player this year so far. And getting Pankata back, you have that familiarity. Pankata probably looking like he has a lot to prove. So while after that Stage 1 loss in playoffs probably could have put them down in panicked, and justifiably so, but getting Pankata back, that excitement of getting a roster change probably bumps them up a little bit. Fans can get hopeful after a roster change occurs. Moving on, we have 2 teams left with pretty big question marks, but I think G2 is honestly in the Hopium right now. Mainly because the expectations for this team were pretty low going into Shanghai. They were expected to be a good team, but I don't think anyone saw a top 3 finish in the cards. I certainly did not. I didn't know if this team was going to be able to make it out of the Swiss stage, but they end up going 2-0 in that Swiss stage. Then they beat Paper X. They go on a bit of a run. They make it to the winners final, but then they did not win a single map in the winners final or the losers final. They definitely got crushed at the end of that tournament. They were playing much like how C9 did during the regular season stage, where they start slow but then just have a crazy comeback. So that's definitely something that they're going to need to fix. They can't just start slow all the time, as we saw with both them and C9 having that just trying to come back ability. That game plan doesn't really work. It's not the most sustainable thing ever. But overall, this team exceeded expectations. I don't see why we wouldn't put them in the Hopium category. I think fans are maybe a little bit concerned with how they ended that tournament, but definitely hopeful for the future. This team has shown that they could just keep improving. They've had a very kind of slow and steady progression in their time in Valorant so far. Dating all the way back to the Guard, a team that had high expectations going into their first international. They got smacked around and then they went through tier 2, and now they're here and they had a top 3 finish at the first international since 2022. So good performance by G2. and I think the fan base is pretty happy and excited for the future. Then we move on to Sentinels, a pretty big question mark in these Americas for this stage. They were 3-3 during stage 1. They did not qualify for playoffs, which means they did not go to Shanghai. So they won Madrid with this amazing, incredible, super tough run, and it just seemed like that stage really took the gas out of this team. It's really hard to stay consistently good in Valorant, and having that quick of a turnaround after just the absolute gauntlet they went through, definitely tough. And I think the fan base is still very hopeful in this team's ability and still sees this team as a top team in the world. Just a team that unfortunately couldn't find the magic that they did early in the season, but is still very capable of doing the same. Zekken's still very good, John QT is still a very good IGL, and Tens continued his strong performance. He actually had a very good stage. So I think I'm comfortable putting them in the Hopium. I can't put them in Chad because they didn't have a great split, but I think Hopium is probably the way to go. I think this fan base definitely still believes. Obviously, Sen has a lot of haters that will say otherwise. But for Sentinels, they've had the rest time. Hopefully, they can adjust to the meta changes with the new patch. And I think with the fan base, as they usually are, they're pretty high on the team. So I don't see a lot of reason to be panicked for Sentinels just because they missed out on Shanghai. In a different context, it'd probably be concerning. But for them, they get some time off and they have that trophy win this year. So hopefully, they can find that same motivation at the end of the year to make it to champions. So this is my panic ranking for pre-stage 1. We don't have anybody in the Chad category. I can't see any of these fan bases really feeling like super high going into stage 1. There are question marks with each and every team, but overall I think this is a pretty good ranking. But let me know in the comment section down below what you think of this ranking and what your own personal ranking would be. Please click like if you enjoyed the video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.